Welcome this afternoon to this Music Teachers webinar with some colleagues. Feel free to turn your cameras on, colleagues. We have an esteemed panel who've just revealed. It's a bit like blind date, isn't it? But good afternoon, everyone. It's fantastic you're here. We're having a conversation today very much about what it is to lead music across groups of schools, academy trusts. So we have a really esteemed panelists who do this at such a huge scale and have done it for so long. I know you've got lots of wisdom and insight to share. And I know we had a lot of interest in this session today. Got a good number joining live, but I know this will be available on the Facebook page, so you might be watching this another time. But any time today, feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat, and we'll probably, after the conversation from the panel, we'll open up the chance for some questions. So I'll let you introduce yourselves, if that's okay, because you've got so much to say about your wonderful work. But maybe when you do introduce yourself, maybe tell us a bit about how did your role emerge? So the role you're currently doing in your MAT, how did it emerge? And maybe if you are the first person to hold it, maybe just give us a bit of a story about maybe, why, how did it happen? So maybe Margaret, do you feel like starting us off? Maybe tell us who you are for our audience, and then maybe tell us a bit about your role.
Sure. So my name is Margaret. I head up creative and extended curriculum for Ark Schools, a multi-academy trust of 39 schools all across the UK. So in Portsmouth, Hastings, Birmingham and London. We work in areas where we can have the most impact, and our fundamental belief is that any child can succeed to do anything and be anyone they want with the right support and structures around them and a great education. I'm actually the third. I have recently moved on jobs, but I was the third director of music for Ark. So Ark is 20 this year, and has had a director of music since the very beginning. That was the incredible Jane Wheeler was the first director of music, who many people will know and idolize. And it was, I guess, came from the really kind of unwavering belief in the power of the creative arts and the power of music in particular to support young people in challenging circumstances, that an academic curriculum and an academic education is vastly and vitally important, but not the only thing that's important. So Jane founded Ark Music all those years ago in our first school, Burdington Danes Academy, out in White City, on the estate in White City. That was then it became something as quite, I guess it was kind of at that point with 1, 2, 3 and 4 schools, was able to be quite responsive and quite heavy on interventions, like quite intensive interventions. And then the kind of second phase was Brian Welton, who's now head of music at Lambeth Music Service, took what was a very emergent program and put some real structures around it. So how can you have influence at scale? Because Ark was rapidly growing. And then I've been in post for 4 years now. So again, looking at how we get that, I guess my core focus has been how do we have a real function focused on curriculum music, elevate and support the state school music sector when we know that it is being disseminated in lots of ways, and actually we really have to fight for it. We've really got to support, elevate and enhance our music departments, both in primary and secondary. So that's a little bit about what I've been up to for the last 10 years.
So he's not been bored. Thank you. Catherine, do you want to come in at this point and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your role and how that came to be?
Thanks, Stephen, and hi to everyone online and joining here on Zoom. So my name is Catherine. I lead music and performing arts across United Learning, which is not an academy trust, actually. It's a schools group. So when the academies were first launched under the Blair government, the United Church Schools Trust, which is a group of independent schools, was the sponsor of some early academies. So as such, now our trust is a combination of a small group of independent schools, quite a lot of whom are in the southeast, prep schools and secondary schools. And some of our independent schools, they're all great from my perspective, but we have some really, really high performing independent schools, which are really interesting to work with and bring a lot of capacity to the other part of my job, which is working with a large number of academies. And the net school number, I think at the moment, is 88. So it's quite a lot of schools, and the reaching across the country from Poole in the south to Carlisle in the north, with early year settings amongst there, and primary school settings and secondary school settings, no special schools yet. So growth has been a really big part of United Learning over the past few years, which I know a lot of people are aware of in the sector, and that has been an interesting part of my job. But where did my role come from? Well, I'm the first person to do the job that I'm doing. Really interestingly, it's very different to Ark, I think. So I was recruited in 2015 to join a team of educators who were in a group called the Partnerships team. There'd been a large donation from a philanthropist for partnership work between independent schools and state schools. And so United Learning was the vehicle for doing that. And really, we just the remit to do stuff together. It was as broad as that. And the activity, therefore, was driven by that funding from that one individual. But it did answer a bigger question for the trust, which was about how can all schools offer something that is as exceptional, with high expectations that you would have in any school in the country. It doesn't matter where you are, what region you're in, who your teacher is. We can try and offer something great to everybody, no matter where you are. And that is really at the heart of what United Learning is about social justice. And arts, of course, is a really important part of that equity. In 2015, our CEO, Sir John Coles, hadn't been enrolled that long, and he had also, with others in the trust, developed the new sort of strategic plan, which is what we call the Framework for Excellence. Different pillars to that, two of which are powerful knowledge and education with character, and music really sits very strongly in those areas. So it made sense for school improvement to involve music and performing arts. And when the relationship with the funder ended, it's like panic from all of us, because what are we going to do? But actually the trust committed to continuing the work and continuing projects and having central resource dedicated to music and the performing arts, because they could see the impact it was having. That losing the funding was in some ways quite liberating, because it meant that we could do things because we saw the real need. And over time our work has become much more nuanced, I think, as a result. So rather than projects and collaborative work, we've still kept some of that, but there's more of the kind of core business of school improvement that happens as part of my role. So it's changed over time.
Great, thank you. And apologies for the dance rehearsal, which is going on just beneath me. But thank you for that, Catherine. Simon, I will mute whether you start talking, so you don't have to listen to whatever that is. But do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, again, your role and how it came into being?
Great, it's really nice to be here, and good afternoon, everyone. I think one of the interesting things that's going to emerge in this session is this is as much about the development of MATs over the last 10 years, as it is about the position of Director of Music. I'm Director of Music of the David Ross Education Trust, which is a MAT in the East Midlands, 34 schools, of which 22 are primaries, 11 secondaries and 1 special school. And by and large, they're in Northamptonshire and Leicestershire, with a few primary schools north of the Humber, and then 1 large through school in the Olympic Park in London, which is part of the legacy from 2012. Unlike Ark or United Learning, this MAT got developed really relatively recently. It was post 2010, as a result of that rather mad Wild West phase in academisation that this country enjoyed. But it started in Grimsby with Havelock Academy in the East Marsh, one of the poorest parliamentary wards in the country, because the sponsor, David Ross, was from Grimsby and had spoken to Andrew Adonis about wanting to give back. And so this is back in the day of building schools for the future. There's incredibly imaginative architectural build right in the heart of the East Marsh. And then a school in Northampton, a failing secondary school, was added in 2010 and became the last of the music colleges as part of the specialist schools program called Malcolm Arnold Academy. And then the academy proliferated over the next 5 years. There's no desire at the moment to take on more schools. So I think we've 34 for us is enough. I was recruited, like Catherine, actually, in 2015, and the brief from the trust sponsor and the CEO was get music going in these schools. In fact, it was even more simple than that. It was sort out music, which is great and quite daunting. But I was given carte blanche to do that. And we're going to talk about what happens in our roles later on. But the thing that I came in to see were some schools that had some music programs, most none. And the big job there has been the first few years to convince head teachers and governors and in fact teachers and parents about why music should be in these schools. And there's just one other thing I'd like to add at this point, which is the slightly crazy structure of this multi-academy trust, like many when I started, which is there was education as a pillar, core subjects, and then enrichment. So sport and music, and the decision there was to sort of ape the independent sector. So it's quite interesting to start in that position whereby, unlike my colleagues here, I was free of any targets to do with exam performance. And what was expected was to see as many students performing as possible and to take them out of schools to amazing venues, to work with professional musicians, to build music in the community and so on. And then gradually I managed to suggest that music is actually education. And there'll be some really interesting moments along the road, transforming moments, and I know that Margaret and Catherine share as well. But I'm looking forward to talk about that later on.
Gosh, thanks for that. It's really interesting. I mean, I wondered, because a lot of us, suppose, you know, as a music teacher, you aspire to be head of music. And now we have a new role where someone is overseeing music from beyond your school. And I wondered, some of the early days of being in this role, what tensions did you experience with those colleagues who were in an individual school who were a head of music, suddenly having a new colleague who was overseeing their work and setting certain direction? And I'm not sure, Margaret, if you want to start us off, but I wondered, because it's a new level, isn't it, of leadership, which many of us on this call never experienced when we were, in early careers. But suddenly, how were you received with colleagues?
Probably have to ask them, but I have good relationships with our heads of music and our primary leads, our principals, and our SLT, and a large part of that, I believe, is coming from a fundamental and kind of unwavering belief in respect and listening, and that teachers are highly skilled. I think teaching is one of the most complex jobs there could possibly be, and a sense of kind of knowing your own lane. I think, kind of knowing what is the power of the network, where is the leverage that we get, that we can make things better in the classroom and beyond the classroom together, and where is the point where those teachers know every child in a way I can never know them, and will make decisions for those children, which is absolutely right. And so I think, this kind of dichotomy or duality or tension that we often feel between autonomy and kind of mandation is something we kind of reflect on daily. I would say at the moment we're having a conversation about exam boards at Key Stage 4. We have a common exam board. We're thinking we might move, but again, that is not an easy thing to get a group of very creative, very strong-minded, very passionate music together on. But I think what we have built over the last number of years since I've been in post is, and before that too, but is a sense of what works, why we are better together, why as individual people there are things that we can let go of as individuals in our schools, and actually it's okay if somebody else does that work, because it frees us up to do the important business of teaching children. It frees us up to do the important business of connecting, of leading rehearsals, of etc. So I think it's a constant kind of line to, and there are times when I will absolutely disagree very, very strongly with the decision that a school or a HOD makes, and I will feel really, clear that I wouldn't have done that. But that's not my place. That's not my job. well, my job is to offer challenge, support, and guidance, and to build, I guess, a culture of trust so that candor can exist, and so we can have those conversations. So I guess it happens less often and less frequently now than it did because of that culture that we've created. But certainly it's something to continuously navigate. And I guess they've noticed it mostly when new colleagues come into the network who haven't been in a trust before, where you either get this kind of feeling of real fear and people think they have to do everything you say they do, or you get people who are just like, who do you think you are? There's like real two extremes. And so like, I think that's when you notice and reflect on how far we've come together, actually, that it tends, and those people tend to very quickly get on board, and for the most part. So yeah, I think it's a really tricky thing.
Oh no, thank you. And I guess I love the idea of the power of the network, as you say, that real power of collective working. Catherine, do you want to jump in at this point? Because I guess you've got a lot more schools and a lot more people that might see you less often as well. And I wonder, anything you wanted to add to that, the challenge of this relationship with a head of music in an individual school?
Yeah, so a lot of Margaret's thoughts resonate definitely with my experiences of this type of role. And it's not unusual just to music with creative individuals. I think any teacher, it's within their kind of their gift to know what they know their students. I still work with partnerships, but also work with school improvement team in the trust. So there are a team of people who are looking at lots of different subjects. And this is something that we reflect on an awful lot, is about how we build trust so that we can have the biggest impact as a team, because that's really what it's all about. We're all working towards the same thing. And I think, again, as Margaret said, I think there are times in the past where I've, not got that quite right in the moment. And, on a certain day when you've been traveling and you've been in school all day, it's just like anyone in the school environment, we do get things wrong. So there's been a lot of reflection and learning over the past few years. But I think we have got to a good place where there is, I think, the interesting idea about this like directiveness of trusts. I've always been very mindful of, because the group is so big, and whilst there are commonalities across our schools, there are a lot of differences, especially regional differences and sizes of department and levels of experience of staff. And so that the way we our expectations have to reflect that to an extent. So we don't have, for example, a common exam board, but we have an advised exam board. So once people use that, then they get all the benefits, but the choice is theirs. Like they still have that agency. But there's a constant sort of to and fro with those sorts of things. And I think my biggest learning over time is to ensure that I give the messages I need to give in person, because that's always helped to build trust. Much more difficult at the moment, of course, when we're a bit more grounded, but that's been really important. So for example, if I'm in a school and I see something that I think I know that I like, if I was the head, or if the head teacher was there, I'd want to challenge, I make sure that I bring that up in the right kind of way in the moment. There's lots of skills that we use to do that kind of thing. And then the other thing is about track record. Like trust and track record go together. So the examples where I do advocate, I've got people's backs, all that sort of thing on a lot wider scale, that has been really important. But also the project work we do helps to build that belief that, oh yes, we are doing this for the right reason, and we know that the stuff from the trust is really good and something we can buy into. And so and the team that I'm with, we look so closely about what our wider offer is. We evaluate in detail, we reflect, we review all the time. We're always like refining the models of things we do based on feedback. So yeah, that's really important to us.
Gosh, thanks, Catherine. And before I ask Simon about these kind of issues, I wondered, with such a large network and the challenge of the pandemic, how has that changed your relationship with your colleagues? Because I imagine not being able to visit schools of the same agility, what's been the impact for you?
A lot of it actually really good. Not that I don't love going to schools, but I can be much more efficient at scale. And I can speak to every single head of department in 2 weeks. And actually, I didn't used to do that before. It would be actually in some ways more light touch. So there's all of that. Plus, of course, the experience that everyone's finding with network meetings, and, it was so costly to get everyone in one place. We did it so rarely, and now we can do it termly. It's no big deal at all. We're not a hub. We don't offer that. It's a different sort of support and guidance. And I think the partnership between those two, that sort of local support from the hub in the partnership, and then aligned with what we can do kind of as a network with all the links into senior leaders in schools and trusts, that is actually quite a powerful combination.
Yeah, no, thank you. Simon, I mean, do you want to tell us a bit about the challenges, not challenges, but how you built relationships with the various heads of music, and any insight from your experience?
Well, look, I've learnt so much in 7 years, and when Margaret talks about the listening, that's the most important thing that we do. Actually, it's the most important thing that music teachers do, quite frankly, isn't it? You listen to your students, you listen to your colleagues, and then you work together to shape something. We're in a very different position now with MATS. When I started, it seemed to be the whole purpose of MATS was to share HR and finance and a few utility bills. The schools had quite a lot of independence. So there was a limit to what you could actually do and what your remit is. And in some MATS, there still is that. The thing I'd sort of learned early on and felt really deeply was the almost institutional isolation of the music teacher. Whether that's in a secondary school where you're trying to lead the curriculum and run extracurricular music without necessarily anyone to talk to, and particularly in my region, Lincolnshire is a big county, and to drive from Lincoln to Skegness, for example, that's an hour. We talk about Lincolnshire miles that are twice as long as anywhere else in the country. But also in primary schools where the position of designated music lead was often filled by the newest person in. What can I do to support them? So actually, I did do a lot of traveling initially, saw lots of performances, saw lots of lessons, was the shoulder to cry on. But also, I thought, actually, what I can do is two things. Just help with some past experiences and help tell everyone what's going on in other schools in the trust. But also to build something in terms of shared performances between schools. We're dealing with quite an isolated community. So the experience of children coming out of school for a carol service, for example, in a neighbouring church with 4 other primary schools and singing Come Ye Faithful can be really good. Likewise, primary and secondary music festivals. I inherited a secondary music festival, which was a competition, and turned it into a festival. I started primary music festivals, and that was great because children could see what other children could do. Even more significant, adults saw what children could do. And then gradually, as those developed, the teachers started talking to each other. Laid on a few things by the side. We always had good food, which helped, and good coffee was really important as well. I sort of became known early on as being intolerant of Nescafe, and this would be cafetiere time. But I did those sort of things deliberately because I wanted to build the community. And then the big change happened in one of the things, like we all do. We get the teachers together for a day a year for CPD. Right? Outlined what our strategy for the year was, what our targets were, invited comments, good discussion. And then one teacher said, do you know what, wouldn't it be great if all of us could think of ourselves as just one big music department? And I said, oh, that's a very interesting idea. And inside I was thinking, hallelujah, that's fantastic, because that's what we need as music teachers, and shared phone numbers and WhatsApp groups and everything. And from that moment, my role has really changed as a result of that. So I think the key thing is it can be quite lonely at first, but then your job is to build the network. And that's what you're paid for, is to make it easier for teachers. And if I may just, most of us, when we started teaching in the previous millennium, were guided by an experienced head of department. Maybe there were 2 or 3 in the department. I was one of 3. We all taught other subjects to make that work. And it meant that we weren't just talking about the curriculum, that was really important. We were actually talking about music. And we go to the pub after work and talk about what we've listened to. And this is denied to most music teachers in the country. So that's why MATs are really important in allowing teachers to be musicians. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer, actually. But that was the kind of the dark art of being a director of music or a conductor or of these roles, is to enable decision making by others and to enable motivation and that sense of I like coming to work. And so I've always wanted everyone to feel that they're part of the same thing.
Oh, great. No, it's just nice to hear. And before I move on to Margaret and Catherine, I might ask you another question really about, with such a large group, how do you know where to direct your time? Because it must be challenging. So what's your way? How do you figure out where to put yourself?
Well, there is a little bit, just like you do when you're a director of music of a school. You might be one person department, you're looking to expand it. You do exactly the same with a MAT. So when I started, it was just me. And I wanted to get a handle into the education pillar. This system doesn't work anymore now. So I had convinced the powers that be to give me a couple of secondments of primary music teachers part-time to be primary music leads, and that grew from 2 to 3. And then with new appointments, gradually, I got a couple of secondary music leads. And now we have a structure whereby across the trust in the core subjects, and music is a core subject, we have curriculum visits and monitoring, and we divide everything up in that way. So I've been very keen to build this team that does that. The pandemic's been really interesting for us because it means that we've thought about at what moments is it necessary to spend 5 hours in a car driving from Northampton to Skegness. Student performances, yes, absolutely. If you're wanting to see all of Year 7 sing, all that stuff, if it's to look at the implementation of the curriculum and see it in action, absolutely I'll do that. And there's a point to that visit. But a lot of it can be done through Teams calls. And we have regular department meetings, we call them secondary music community meetings, and we've got trust-wide CPD. So it is actually about two things. It's about getting a structure so that every teacher has someone within the team with whom they're connected. And in some cases, they're talking to them every day, but also making sure that your direction is going to be meaningful at any moment and with every interaction. And that's where the demand is for us three here. Us four, in fact, Steve.
I don't know, but you're the experts here. No, thanks for that. I mean, Margaret, can I ask you maybe tell us a bit about your offer, thinking about what Simon's just mentioned in terms of, network meetings, trust. Maybe do you want to tell us a bit about your music offer for Ark, and maybe a bit about how you focus your attention on particular schools or issues?
So our offer is, I guess, is threefold. Is around curriculum, shared curriculum, CPD for teachers in both, so from nursery up to A level, is a focus on in-school enrichment, but progressing those beyond school. So often for children who maybe aren't ready to take a step to like their hub ensemble, but they need that interim piece, and that's our Inspiring Excellence program, and that again is primary through to secondary, and our scholars and things are part of that. And then events and celebrations and various different nice things to do, like the others are talking about. Say our full offer is from nursery to the end of Key Stage 5 now, and so any teacher in an Ark school, whether they're in primary or secondary, will have a connection to the music program. In terms of what those kind of like network meetings and things like that, we have every school has a primary music lead, so that will be somebody who has the task of leading and championing, but also on the really boring, really quite stressful oftentimes, the making it happen, the admin side and the logistics side of music in primary schools is incredibly complex for people who are teaching full time. You've got your hub coming in, you've got your artists, you've got people are coming in to do, it's a big job, but we've got one in every school. They're supported by our primary music specialist, and they receive quite a significant amount of CPD around subject leadership and non-specialist subject leadership. But also we have, of course, network meetings, as the others are saying. We've got 6 of them across the year. We then in secondary have 3 what we call network days, and those 3 network days are days where everybody is off timetable, and our secondary music community train, moderate, standardize, have access to maybe some project stuff, and that's one every term. And on top of that, then we also have 6 network meetings where we agree kind of shared priorities. We try and push through with those shared priorities. We will kind of share information about events that are coming up or projects that are coming up. We will often kind of fight it out over some kind of something that's come up in the network. But so there's 6 twilight sessions over the course of the year. Our offer is quite broad in terms of, we have network ensembles, network choirs, network orchestras, a whole range of things, and probably a bit complex to get into in this space. But in terms of where I focus my time, it's a real balance between firefighting, which is inevitable. Like, there are moments where there are crises and you have to be responsive to those. Fundraising applications, a big part of my job is trying to find money to make this happen, because simply state music provision is not sufficient for the quality of education that we want to offer, and our parents are not in a position to support that. Strategy, kind of working out where we're going next, meeting with partners. There's kind of every day is quite drastically teaching, leading rehearsals. Every day is quite different, and so it takes a bit of discipline to kind of keep on top of the diary and kind of be really focused on where you can have the most impact. But I would absolutely agree with what Simon is saying, that connection is the most important part of your job, and being really ruthless about what needs your attention in person and what can happen online, because there are things that are not. They're just simply not replicable online. As you say, like things like concerts, and it's really important to go to the school musicals. It's really important to be there, to be able to like pat the teacher on the back, say, wow, you did such a great job, like well done, and to show them your support by being there in person, I think is really valuable. But yeah, I definitely haven't got the balance right of how to spend my time.
Well, you're certainly not bored.
I can't do everything. Oh.
You're not bored, and it's a really interesting point you make, which I hadn't really thought about. Just having 2 schools, is that all the events that must go on, and the expectation that you will come. I mean, Catherine, do you want to maybe tell us a bit about your program and how? And I'd be interested to know. Maybe you can tell us all, how on earth do you strike that balance of being present at what must be a very large number of music events a year?
So. At the moment, it's slightly different because, of course, where we're still at in the pandemic, actually, as an advisory team and a central team, we are a bit more grounded than we normally would be. So I am within these 4 walls more than I typically would have been. But just to give you a day in the life. So in my 5-day working week, Monday and Friday, I'm always at home. No matter what, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I would be out on the road somewhere, wherever that is, in a region, or maybe just going backwards and forwards from home. So, and how do I know where the support goes, or even just let's just talk about my time. So, there's a question before that, really, like, how do you define support? Like, what is support? What's needed? So there's a whole heap of different things. Margaret alluded to some of those, like the strategic stuff, the making links with partners. I'd add into that things like advocacy, which I spend quite a lot of time at various times of year doing. Of course, the firefighting, coaching. I spend a lot of time doing that sort of work, or the listening and conversations. And I think probably one of the biggest bits of my toolkit that I invested in early on in the role is getting training in coaching, because it's absolutely like the core to everything I do, how I structure conversations, how I work as that kind of colleague. And that's not, that's additional to my music toolkit, that's really important. And then the other sort of support I would say is like the self-service. So resources, stuff that we have on our internet, stuff that we have on our hub, the stuff where people don't have to come to me, they can just go somewhere else. That sounds really heartless, but actually it's way more efficient when you're at this level of scale. And that is a growing offer, which is really exciting. And projects are a form of support. So whenever we do a large scale, like nice to have thing, that's what people look at on the surface, but underneath it there is this enormous amount of planning to try and ensure that at every level it addresses some kind of need, because again we don't have enough money to do everything that we want to do, so every single bit of activity has to have as much impact leverage as possible. How do I know where to go when there are 90 different brilliant schools? And I've been to all but one, because one came in sort of just before pandemic and I've not quite managed to get there, even though it's only 7 miles from my house, which is a bit sad. So I have this like spreadsheet, of course there's a spreadsheet, where all these different metrics which help me decide. So the trust itself will have priority schools every year. That goes into my group of schools that I really prioritise. I will have a level of need for one-person departments, as Simon was saying. I've got a level of need for ECTs who need that encouragement support, especially if they're on their own. It does happen. I've got metrics based on subject take-up, outcomes, but that's not as important actually for me as size of department, because it's all contextual. Schools that are in special measures or inadequate, but they tend to be the priority schools. Outstanding schools with limited music provision. I worry a lot about those schools, because that says something about advocacy in the trust, because schools will go and like senior leaders go and visit those schools and go, oh, that's a brilliant school, but they haven't really bothered with music, so if they don't, then we won't. So I spend loads of time with those schools, etc., all these metrics, and that helps me to identify where I need to prioritize my time. And at the bottom of that pyramid, there are probably some schools who think, oh, I don't really see Catherine very much at the moment, but that's because on my metrics I'm not worried about them, and they can do the self-service bit. Again, that sounds really heartless, but at the scale this is how we have to work. In terms of the additional capacity, there are others in the trust to support each other. And really interestingly, when I first started in the role, I was only working 3 days a week because my children were really young at that point. I've got 2 little boys, and so I actually commissioned the Greater Manchester Music Hub to work with me in the north, and that was really, really powerful, because again it set up the stall of this is what we believe about working with hubs, and how we want everybody to really latch into their hub, and so we can kind of enhance the offer together. But now I travel more.
Great. No, thank you for that. And actually it's a really interesting question to follow on to Simon about music hubs, because we talk a lot about this in cultural education, where so much of cultural education is place-based, whilst all of your trusts exist beyond such cultural education, plate baking. I'm thinking about food now, place-making boundaries. I wondered, Simon, how, because obviously you're forming relationships, as you've all talked about so brilliantly, about the relationships across your own network and with teachers. And you've touched on my relationship with partners. What is it then to build those relationships with the various hubs you interact with?
Well, I mean, look, that was the first decision I made on taking the job, is I wanted every school to have a really productive relationship with their hub. And there's a very practical reason for that, beyond the ethical of the fact that we share, which is government money for extended music education is going to hubs. So I want to see a piece of that. I'm working with 7 different hubs, and it's a joy, mutually, I hope. The thing I found early on was it was really beneficial for those local music services to be guaranteed access to schools, because that's what we can do in this role. It's very easy to have the conversation with a head saying, we need more children learning a musical instrument, and this is how we're going to do it. And the reverse happens as well, the neutral opposite, which is to go to a CEO of hub and say, right, look, we've got 11 primary schools here. This is the direction of travel that we'd like in terms of the instruments we'd like them to pick up and how it connects with the curriculum. And how can you help us with that? And I've always found them really receptive there. And the other thing, of course, is that the role of mats and hubs is absolutely crucial because we're able to connect hubs with each other. I'm able to say to the head of Hull Music Service, well, look, actually, when I'm in Northampton, this is the deal we get, but also this is what's working and what isn't. So I think it's really important, and of course, one of the things that hubs are charged with is school music education plans and helping and supporting. Well, those plans were announced when there are only a handful of multi-academy trusts and only a handful of academies. Now there are more, so we need to help do our bit for the national picture. And if that means for our 13 schools in Northamptonshire, I'm able to guarantee access to all the year threes learning the violin and string and developing a string program there, or minority instruments going into our secondary schools, and that can impact on the county's music making. Then that's actually that's something we can say we were actually making a difference.
Great, no, thank you, Margaret. Would you say you've had a similar experience with hubs?
Mixed. I think, in the way that no two mats are the same, no two hubs are the same. I think there's also a bit of a nervousness sometimes from hubs that mats don't want to have anything to do with them, and that they're very hard to kind of get in to penetrate and things like that. Also for me and my team and the central team, it has always been incredibly important to me that we don't replicate the work that other people are doing, which I guess is kind of what Simon is saying as well, for the practical reasons around the funding, but also because we need to work in support of the ecosystem around our children. And actually there are people who do things better than we do, and that is why we have focused on curriculum, on professional development, on school improvement. That's our space, like that's what we can do. I think that we have some examples of incredibly positive relationships. I know Stuart is here from Birmingham, and certainly that would be a really great example of where a hub has been so open, has worked with us to understand our priorities, but to also understand that we can't do everything straight away. And actually sometimes what is on offer just isn't right for that school in that moment. We very much on the central team have a needs-based response and kind of treat our schools as individuals. And so there are times when maybe they might step away from working with a hub where it's just not the right offer for them at time, but they will be back. And that kind of, again, is a piece of trust, I think, But I 100% support our hubs. And any hub who comes to me and says, we'd like to work with your schools, or when I've gone to them and said, this is what we'd like to do, it has always been an incredibly positive conversation. And I would hope that when the national plan comes out, if only we knew some people who were on the panel, I would hope that it would take a special kind of that relationship between hubs and schools be really explored and kind of be lent into a little bit more strongly. But I would have to be very honest and say a mixed bag, like very much a mixed bag. I'm working across like 30 hubs or something, so it's a lot. But where it's positive, it's immensely positive, and what I would hope will be the model for the future, for going for the next steps.
Thank you. And it's what Simon said, isn't it? That in your roles, you're able to see good hub working, less, and be able to share across the hub network. This was really good in Hull. Try this in Scale. Yeah. Catherine, is that a similar experience for you with hubs?
To some extent. Unfortunately, typically there's maybe just one or two schools within an area who are part of a hub. So where I have more schools, I tend to have more developed relationships. But it's very hard to I have a big contact book, because I don't just look at music, I also look at drama, and I work with dance teachers as well. So I think there's like a number of people that you can know in your life, and I'm definitely there. But in saying that, I've always been really open when people do get in touch, and I've got in touch with people and always been really like excited and pleased when that gets to something fruitful. Plus, I think when I've been invited to engage with the Music Mart network, and the heads of hubs and experience some of their CPD and the way that they're thinking, strategic thinking, that has always been so valuable to see it from their perspective. And I had a particular cold spot in Sheffield for quite a long time. It was, the writing was on the wall when I went to a conference. I sat down next to a head teacher and said, "Oh, hello, my name is Catherine Barker. I'm going to be doing music in United Learning." He said, "Yeah, my schools don't know music." Just flat out, they don't do it, they don't want to do it. And so of course that was then my mission, to fix music in Sheffield. So as part of that, I was delighted when Ian Naylor asked me to be a trustee on the advisory board for that hub, and that's been very helpful for me to understand how they work as well, and to have skin in the game. Like, I really feel invested that I want to help them to be better and to learn from them.
Yeah, no, thank you. Gosh, I'm learning so much here. My last question, I guess, and it comes on the back of what Catherine and I chatted about at the CST, Confederation of School Trusts session, looking at leading arts at scale across trusts. And there are colleagues who might be on the call now, who might be watching this later, who are stepping up into a similar role or have been asked by their mats, who have probably seen all your wonderful work and think, oh, we should replicate that. And I wondered, with all your experiences, what advice would you give to those colleagues who might be asked to step up into a central role or working across a trust to lead music? And some I've spoken to have been given a day, a week to do a certain kind of activity. What would maybe I'll start with Catherine, what might be your top 1 or 2 bits of advice to say to someone who's about to start on a role like yours, a group of schools? What might you suggest to them based on your learning?
I think it would really depend on the size, the group of the schools, and the geographical location and all that kind of stuff, and the phase, because I think it would be different depending on where you're at. But let's just say, hypothetically, it's been a strong head of department who has been asked to step up to that role. You can see that there's going to be a potential tension there of, working that now in a sort of there's been a new hierarchy brought into the dynamic. That's why the collaboration and listening and facilitating everything that Simon was talking about is going to be really important. However, I would add to that, if you don't do stuff, then people won't get behind you. So you have to demonstrate that track record in the sense of, this is what I'm doing for you, here's what's in it for you to come with me. And that's like anyone, it's like we see it with new school leaders who come in, and I see it with new heads of department. And I did it myself when I went to a school as a head of department, taking over a very established, very high performing department. I just think really carefully about how, what was I going to add and how it's going to bring people with me. So I'm not sure if that's advice, but
that is a really good point.
Take on it.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. Simon, what's your pearls of wisdom for someone stepping up?
Absolutely what Catherine says about the personal level. You're paid to think and to get a sense of perspective, which you can't do when you're teaching 50 periods out of 60. There is a need for you to sort of show that you can actually deliver the goods. So that's the first thing. Second is actually what's needed. And the whole point of MATs is we're better together than as isolated schools. And there are certain things that can happen at scale that cannot happen in a physical school. So a big festival is an obvious thing. Giving children the opportunity to see individuals and ensemble performances of other schools. That's great. Helps build the trust identity. Everyone has a good time. There is a lot of work underneath it. But if they come in and it's an inspiring venue and they walk in, there's the wow factor from the feel of it and the wow factor of the music making, and they go out of it inspired to do something else. That's great. And there's one other example I'll give you, which is actually where we begin to be interested in the economy of scale and the literal economy with money. We've got a project at the moment with the Berkeley Ensemble for all our 11 secondary schools, ostensibly GCSE and A-level students, but anyone can join. So we have got some year 7, 8, 9s doing it, which is going over 3 months, virtually and in reality as well. They've got guided mentorship from professional musicians for developing their own compositions. There's a composition toolkit. The players come into one academy at the beginning of the project, another one halfway through. They play through their first drafts, and it's beamed through Zoom to all the schools, and then at the end it goes to another school and it's recorded, and it forms part of our festival. Now that is actually really good value for money as a project between schools, and it's something that an individual school could never do. So I think that's the thing. If you can do something that will genuinely add value, you're not getting in the way, you're helping there. But come and talk to us about this, because we all three of us have had experience of putting lots of energy into things that haven't worked.
And you've made them work.
And actually that sense of, right, okay, we're not going to do that, we're going to reform it, is also really important. And it's important that your colleagues see the fact that you own up when it hasn't worked, and share the learning with that.
Thank you. And the last word is Margaret's. What might your advice be to someone who might be stepping up?
Pretty much what's been said. Get out from your computer. Don't sit behind your laptop answering emails. That's not what you're being paid to do. You're being paid to do that too. But you've got to be able to walk the walk, and you've got to continue to focus on your own practice as a teacher, as an educator, as a musician, and as a leader and coach. If you don't do that, you will so quickly lose credibility with the networks around you, because teachers are savvy. They know people who have a good talk. They know it straight away, and they don't want it, and they don't care. So I think it's continue to invest in yourself. Keep teaching as long as you can possibly teach, even if it's a half a day a week. Try to keep doing it. And all of those kind of aspects, I think, are just got to be credible. You've got to be good at the components. Not everything, obviously, can't do that, but there are things about. That's what I would say.
Brilliant, thank you, and thank you to everyone today. I'm just going to put our initials HT. It looks like head teacher, but we've got a question in the chat which I'll read out. But just thank you for everyone. Your contributions are brilliant, and I think anyone who might be watching this back, I think we've all learned a great deal about some key themes of your work. So thank you for sharing. I might see who fancies answering this, but I think it's been answered quite a bit. So the question is, could you talk about funding? How is everything funded? Purely through the mat, fundraising, sponsorship? Are there different funds? This feels like a big topic. What sort of budget do you have? I mean, I suppose some of these, it's like trade secrets, isn't it? So I suppose we won't make anyone reveal the balance sheets, but I guess maybe for ease now, I guess if you've got one, if each of you might think of one top tip for securing some resource. So thank you for the question. It's a brilliant one. And I think, Hannah, we're all asking this. We all pick everyone's brain up constantly about where to get money from. I know the Forum strategy, which is a club for CEOs, they send around a funding bulletin each week to their members. So it might be worth checking with your school to see if your academy gets a funding briefing with some suggestions. But otherwise, should we just whiz around? If you've got a bit of a kind of, what's your top tip? Well, one piece of wisdom on fundraising. Catherine?
I can't take credit for this, but our procurement team, our estates team, have set up some very good relationships with our larger providers, where they do their charitable giving through the trust.
Thank you.
So, for example, our energy provider, that's very topical, isn't it?
Oh, no, it's good. And that's how the City of London worked. I guess having a great procurement team does help you maximise the resource you've got. Margaret?
We are entirely philanthropically funded, so we receive no DFE. We don't take, so most maps will take, right, the top will take kind of a percentage off the top, and that will go to the central team. Ark Music does not receive any of that, so we are entirely philanthropically funded. That's a really difficult position because it means we're very vulnerable, and we're consistently, when I said that fundraising is a part of my job, the reason is because we've got to keep fundraising all the time or we don't continue to exist. So as I say, there's different ways that maths fund central teams. We are, let's say, entirely philanthropically funded. We have a small pot from music to develop work that we're doing with 18 to 25 vulnerable young people in music leaderships. But other than that, it's high net individuals who have given to us.
Wow, we're grateful they have. Simon?
Okay, I'm going to be controversial here because the entire direct program is government funded, and it wasn't initially. It started in 2015 with a grant from the David Ross Foundation of 50,000, which is, doesn't really go all that far, and then it grew, and because our sponsor is a philanthropist and has a bit of money, he hasn't got his money by throwing it away. And it's always been the plan to enable schools to be self-sufficient. Now, a single rural school can't do that, but the whole point of MATS is that, exactly as you've been saying, that you're sharing your utility bills and all of that, and you make choices. And there are schools up and down the country that value music. It's not so much actually about the finances, about the value they place on it, and are really strategic about it. Now, yeah, of course, there is ticket income, and we do look at at sponsored runs and so on, and all that imaginative thing. But same thing for the sport team. But we've come on a long journey to kind of show that you can do it, but, and this is the but, a MAT can't do it on its own. You have to be working with your partners, which are hubs, which are national portfolio organisations, all of these arts council organisations and private donors as well. We're all part of a vast ecology, and I think it's really important that we don't say we're just doing it on our own. That's a sort of long-winded answer.
No, not at all. Thank you. It's a really difficult issue, isn't it? And I think everyone asks this. We need money, but I suppose you have to think quite deeply about what you want to do before just grabbing money. And I think if you are stepping up to a role, which I think we've all had chats with these people, haven't we? But actually, don't worry about finding money. Actually, think more about what you need to do, the space you need to occupy with the people you're working with.
If I may, actually, one of the probably the most important thing that anyone has said to me in this job was a head teacher about 2 years in, and he said, "Look, Simon, I've been teaching 20 years. I've taught in schools that have been in special measures and those that require improvement. I've got my current school to good, but I've never taught in an outstanding school, and I don't know what it feels like." And so I thought, okay, well, that's really interesting. So we had a chat about this. We won't talk about music particularly, but just about, you can't have a checklist of outstanding. You need to know, you need to visit. Then I thought about music. Okay, so how many people in education know what outstanding music education is? How many people have experienced it? I don't think there are many. I think many people have experienced less than satisfactory music education. And so if that's their memory, if that's the finance managers or head teachers' memory is of a curriculum that's not fit for purpose, of a handful of children who are playing the keyboard and it doesn't lead to anything, of 6 kids staying behind after school for ensemble where doesn't sound good, you're not going to get them to give money. This is our job, is to show what children can actually do and why the money that we're paying for in taxes needs to go towards that. And then you do that whole thing about making head teachers and finance managers feel guilty if they don't give money towards music.
You're giving all your secrets away now, Simon. But thank you.
Thank
you for everyone. And it is a really important issue to end with. And I know we've come to the end of this evening. So thank you to everyone who shared. Thank you, Margaret, Catherine, and Simon. It's really, really good. And I think anyone who's watching this will find it a really useful session, I think, and what they're going to think about and how they might approach this role. And I know they can reach out to the MTA, and that's the best place to finish now, really, is to remind you that if you are not a Music Teacher Association member, you might want to consider it because you get quite a lot. You can see on this slide alone, you are not short of things to get involved with. And I suppose a network, as we've all revealed in the conversation tonight, is only as strong as its members. And I think music education particularly needs a genuinely diverse inclusive and representative network. So the Music Teachers Association would gladly have new members that help really capture the diversity of practice and musical expertise that's going on in our schools, because we really want it to be an association that is genuinely, representative of our music teaching workforce today. But thank you very much for today. It was fantastic that you've all joined us, and have a lovely evening. I think the red button will be going off shortly. We'll be no longer live. But thank you, Jill, backstage, and thank you for watching.